I was dancing. You like the music?
I do. It was kind of like, I don't know. It got it got me moving. I don't know. It was kind of just like catchy. It's better than elevator music or anything that you might hear on the phone.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, if it's just too much for this, because if you're on the West Coast, it's early, right?
Oh yeah, it is.
So that might be a lot for early.
Maybe because I had some coffee.
Yeah,
I'm
thinking about going more like tropical vibe. But I'm grabbing this link here so I can stick it in the event so we don't miss anyone. And so thank you so much, Kristina, for joining me. Everybody, tell us where you're at. We'd love to see where you're all coming from while I do this link thing.
Multitasking host extraordinaire.
I learned this hack. I figured out this hack for myself, but then I went to like a LinkedIn event where they were talking about events and said this was a hack. And then I'm like, oh, I'm so, like I knew the hack. Look at that. So since I go live to my LinkedIn page, what I do is I create an event and then go and add the link to the event so that you can find me in case someone signs up for it who is not. Okay, I'm almost done. I see Meg. She likes to dance music. Hi, Meg. All right. So that is done. Boom. So that's done. So far, I guess we'll wait for some more people to roll in. But I'm so glad to have you. I feel like we've known each other forever, but we haven't really because, it's been since the pandemic, meeting in Rev Genius.
I know, it's crazy. You're one of the first people I really engaged with through Rev Genius. And that was back in like, oh gosh, was it June or July? Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
2020 is a blur right now. I think the next 2 months are going to feel the same way. But yeah, now it's crazy. I'm really excited to be here. And, I've been watching all the great guests that you've had so far. And to even be in the category, I'm like feeling pretty blessed and grateful. So thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining me. You've been everywhere. In case there's anyone who doesn't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh gosh, this is the fun part, right? Where you get to talk about yourself. So I'm Kristina Finseth, obviously. My name's on here, but I run growth marketing for a startup company called Interseller, which is a platform for prospecting and outreach for recruiters and sellers. I also was the volunteer head of growth for Rev Genius for the first 3 months and helped grow that community from 50 people to 5,000. Now they're at over 7,000, which is pretty crazy. Now I am just sitting back in the sidelines and just hanging out with people like Jen and just continuing to get to know them. But yeah, that's pretty much a little bit about me. I'm in Philadelphia area. I also am a mom of 3, in addition to, trying to hustle out there. But yeah, that's it.
Mom of 3. Yeah. I can't imagine being outnumbered. My husband and I were just.
Yeah, that's a whole nother probably topic of discussion. Once you're outnumbered, you're screwed. It's not like I can take one and he can take one and, we're good. It's now you've got a third one, but yeah.
Awesome. So how old are they?
So Haley is my oldest and she's 12 going on 30. Super mature, super responsible, self-motivated, great. And then I have my 10-year-old son, Chase. He's my middle one. He's my mama's boy. He'd probably hate it if I said that. And then I have baby O, Olive, and she is going to be 3 in January. And she is literally going to be a future CEO one day. I can just tell by the character traits. She's stubborn. She's bossy. She's very bossy. But she does get you to follow. So
hey, whatever works, Michelle is, I guess, missing your avocados.
I know. I'm missing my avocados too, Michelle. I feel naked. If anybody on here knows that I usually have an avocado background, it's really weird for me. I'm rocking the corner of my room right now that has baby decorations. I am not that into pink. Disclaimer.
Yeah, pink's not my favorite color either. But it doesn't look that pink. It doesn't, like, you've got the pink thing, but it doesn't look that pink. Well, we're here to talk about cracking the code of outbound. You had posted something on LinkedIn about, how you were doing outbound. You've been talking about it a lot, and thought this is a good opportunity to just, what are you doing? How did you crack it, and what's that like? And tell us.
Yeah. So outbound, as everyone knows, is a tricky topic, right? And, one of the things that's really important and that I've kind of found is, obviously there's no silver bullet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prospects are different and no two prospects are the same. And at the end of the day, we're all human. So it's about how can you get through to people and get more engagement going. So I think what's been really important for me in kind of the migration I've gone through is, I'm a marketer by trade. I did a year-long sales experiment as an AE, which I think definitely helped me to kind of hone in on some of the parts to help with marketing and sales alignment. But, when I first started in sales, I only wanted to do outbound. That's all I wanted to do. And, there's this thing that, you can control your own destiny. And so the idea of building my own pipeline and actually reaching out to the targets that I wanted to reach out to was much more enticing to me than being an inbound rep. Just me. That's what I wanted to do. I like the creativity. I will be the first one to tell you that the first kind of outbound campaigns or sequences I would run were very marketing-y, if that's a word. Good messaging, but a very one-to-many approach. Mm-hmm. And, I'd get maybe like a 1% to 2%, sometimes a 3% conversion to booked meetings, which is pretty respectable. And then I kind of got triggered by something that, I read from Beck Holland about kind of this reverse engineering on LinkedIn of LinkedIn content and using that to fuel your premise for outreach. And so I started experimenting and putting some things together and doing much lower volume outreach, but to, highly personalized messages. Took a little bit more time. But what I found is by highly personalizing the message and not even talking about your product, your service, a problem, a solution, nothing, just take all of that out of your entire outreach, which is hard for us as salespeople to really accept. Take all of the pitching out, nothing. And if you have a compelling enough message or it pulls on someone's heartstrings, it can turn an outbound lead into an inbound lead. And what I mean by that is if you have a message that gets someone's attention and cuts through the noise, you're putting the onus to research on your prospect. And you're also laying the cards that your website's on point.
Yeah.
So that's kind of important too. But they will go and do their own research without you having to spell that out for them. And when they respond to you, they'll respond to you with that context in mind without you having to bring that up. And so I think what I found is, I'd rather do that all day and get 10% booked meetings with people who actually engaged and feel really compelled to have that conversation with me than reach out to hundreds of people and, try to move the needle at mass.
No, I found that as well. Like the quality over quantity always wins. I mean, I remember, people coming back to me like, you have to increase the call volume for your team, increase the call volume. And, I would do it, but then I would say, okay, I'm canceling my week. I'm going to do, more, personalized outreach. And so which results do you want? Do you want these results or do you want these results? Because these results is less call volume. And that always seemed to work to get that buy-in from executives that, a more personalized approach actually works better. I do find it interesting, though, the idea of going from outbound to inbound. That, not a lot of people I hear are actually doing that. So, yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, people like to feel like they're in control, right? I mean, I personally, I don't want someone to tell me when I'm going to meet with them, right? Or that I need their product, because quite frankly, you might not necessarily know what I'm currently doing. And so to say things like, you know, basically to say anything in an email or any kind of outreach attempt that makes someone feel like you think you know what they're doing for a certain strategy or in lieu of your product, can sometimes be offensive to certain people. And so I think there's this element of giving someone else the control and freedom to decide if the conversation is going to go that way. And so all you're doing is saying, hey, Jen, I came across your Sales and Leadership with Heart podcast. I love the episode with Catherine, right? It really resonated with me. With that said, I'd love to learn more about you and what you're up to and what your priorities are. And I'd love to earn the right to talk through how Interseller might fit in. Do you have some time? That's it. I'm leaving it to you to say, okay, I kind of like this message. Let me see what she does, who Kristina is, and all right, maybe I'll give her 10, 15 minutes of my time. And it's more about, the soft positioning that I found really does go a long way. And then if people don't respond to that, I do run re-engagement campaigns that are drastically different quarter over quarter, that are more short, direct, to the point. And the people who normally respond to those and actually move forward in the process also respond back short, direct.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, it just goes to say no two prospects are the same. You've got to have your A, right? And that A is kind of this personalized framework that we have here at Interseller, and that I preach about all the time. And then you've got to be able to run B tests against that to try to pick up additional people that maybe just didn't get moved by your A frame.
Yeah, no, those are some great points. We do have some comments. So they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So true. That is a very true statement. I'm a big fan of quality over quantity. Yeah, me too. If anyone has any questions, please shoot them over in the comments. We will answer any questions you have. So tell us when, and I love your strategy, love your approach, when you're scaling that and you need to do that together, right? How did you go about that?
Yeah, this is my favorite part because, once you've kind of cracked the code, and just for context here, everyone, when I first started at Interseller, I was still working in that year-long AE experiment. So I was still boots on the ground in the shoes of the sales team for the first 6 months that I was here. I migrated over to this growth marketing role, which really owns kind of all of demand gen, top of funnel, business development, and the marketing side. And, one of the things that I was the most excited about is, all right, great. We've seen a lot of success with me doing this. Let's make sure that this is able to be replicated by others on the team. And so one of my favorite parts of the job, and it's not really in the job description, is enablement, right? So there's like this fine line of enabling the team to run the framework. And so, I've done trainings internally. I have set up their sequences for them. I think the key is also just making it as simple as you can. And so while the first email is very heavy with personalization and it does require the ability to research and infuse that into it, the rest of it is pretty much kind of, I don't want to say checking off the boxes, but, there's the steps that need to be done and there's a little bit more of a methodology and science behind it. Mm-hmm. But everything is automated in the sense of when the rep runs that step, they don't have to worry about going into Salesforce and updating it. I've gotten it to where it automatically will log those for them. So it's kind of taking the bottlenecks out of the process. And so that's something I'm working with the team on, week over week, and just trying to encourage them and get them excited about outbound. Mm-hmm. And I just hired an SDR, Erica, who is phenomenal. And, I hired for creativity. I wanted someone who could infuse the creativity. Anyone can run a process if you teach it to them. The creativity is the harder part. And so it's nice to see that it's being replicated across the team. And it's more about just building out the playbook and then sharing the changes and the findings and helping them to run the process with as little bottleneck as possible.
That's great. That's really wonderful. Do you have a playbook? Do you have like a documented process for Erica or whoever else you bring on later as you grow?
Good question. So I wouldn't say it's like this cohesive document. The playbook is laid out in different components. Like we use Notion, we use Google, we use Interseller, which is obviously the platform we sell, but we have all of it kind of laid out. And so the training program is really easy because it's really just getting to know the system, the framework, the science, the methodology. There's a slide deck on the entire framework. So everything is there. And it just makes it really easy. I think I'm probably, if all goes well, looking to add 2 more SDRs in Q1. Hint, hint, planting the seed if anyone thinks change at the end of the year or beginning of the year. And so the goal is to continue to replicate that process.
That's amazing. So when they're going through this process, how much time do you expect the SDR to spend on the research piece?
Yeah. So this is the question that gets a lot internally and externally. And so I'm glad that you asked that. There is an order of prioritization in how research is done here so that you don't get into this rabbit hole. And then there's a secondary kind of outreach cadence for those that don't meet the order of prioritization. So what that is we have our target accounts. So let me just start there. We already have our target accounts that will probably be working for the next couple of years, which is also really helpful because we're not trying to find our target accounts. We've got that nailed down. From there, as we're working those target accounts, what we're looking for is obviously the key decision makers that we would be going after, and seeing who is the most active on LinkedIn. And by active, I mean, the first thing that I want to use for research is if that person actually posts things of their own on LinkedIn that have some sort of thought and substance to them, right? Even if it's sharing a Forbes article and saying some of the pieces that resonated with them. That's what we're looking for as like the pinnacle, right? If it ends up being an individual contributor, that's okay too, but there's kind of that decision maker subset that we look at first. If that does not exist, which sometimes it doesn't, I've gone through an entire company of 15 to 18 people and been like, okay, none of these people post on LinkedIn. Like, what the heck? Then you go to the LinkedIn company page. Are they posting content? Are they posting things about the events that the company is doing together culturally? Are they sharing blog content? Whatever you could use to then infuse that into your message. And if that doesn't exist, which sometimes happens too, then I go to the company website and Google search results to try to find, like, is there a press release that recently came out? Is there anything that I could use here to infuse this? So with that said, that sounds like a long laundry list of things to look through, but it does matter. And I will say practice makes perfect. So the more you do it, the quicker it becomes. The quicker you realize when you should abandon and run the secondary campaign, the quicker you get at pulling the right nuggets out really easily without having to give as much thought. But you've got to just do it first. That's the part that people sometimes.
Yeah, no, I get it. And, as another fan of Beck Holland, I've used that sort of strategy, right?
Yeah.
I also find that IT people or senior leadership, a lot of time you'll find nuggets on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I typically will have Twitter up just to see what I can find there. It's amazing how many people are on Twitter now, right? We do have some questions. So let's see. What interview questions and strategies do you use to find the creativity?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Catherine. I think sometimes creativity surfaces itself without you having to actually ask about it. And what I'm really trying to say there is, it's funny, and hopefully Erica doesn't mind that I share this story, but she was actually interviewing for an AE role. And with any of our sales roles or roles where you may be reaching out to potential prospects, we have an exercise that we have them do where they build a sequence in Interseller, they do some prospecting, they work on some messaging, and it's pretty straightforward. It's 25 prospects. You only have to create one email sequence and go from there. And when I tell you, I went into her exercise to review it, and she had 4 or 5 different sequences. They were all different, and they were using the framework that we use, but she didn't have any insight into a second or third or fourth email. She created those herself. And the creativity was there. The personality was there. The human element was there. And so for me, I just remember looking at my head of sales, virtually, of course, and saying, man, I really think she could be a really strong outbound, like SDR. Like I really believe that. And he was like, okay, we'll come on this interview and let's just talk, I'll loop you in for this. And so I think what I'm trying to say, Catherine, is creativity will usually show itself. And if you're doing any kind of exercise where they have the ability to maybe hone in on some of that creativity, that's where it's really going to shine. And so for this one in particular, I would say just doing the exercise and seeing how they think and how they craft outreach, because copywriting is so important in sales. It was just, I basically gave her an assist, or we gave her an assist, and she just like full on slam dunked instead of just, doing a layup. So yeah, I think that was really helpful.
Okay. So let me now when you're looking at your outbound, are you adding LinkedIn? Are you making phone calls? What does your sequence look like?
Yeah, good question. So we are not making any cold calls, which some people are like, oh, what?
No.
But what I'll tell you is, again, remember, we're a prospecting and outreach platform that's built for email automation. And so there's this element of using your own dog food, or eating your own dog food, shall I say. And so we really do use our platform for everything. But with that said, we have a multi-step process that combines both email and LinkedIn touch points. So we'll do a connection request. We're big on LinkedIn voice messages, which is kind of like cold calling, I guess, if you want to
it is
that way. LinkedIn video messages, etc. Memes, GIFs, we're pretty fun and playful, but we do zero cold calling.
Yeah. No, I remember hearing about that, and I was like, wow, zero cold calling. See, I enjoy cold calling. So that's just me, If what you have works for your target market, then that's what works. That's awesome.
Well, and that's the thing. If I did bring in someone who really liked to cold call, do it. That's the thing. It's about the outcome, not the activities. And so if the outcomes aren't there, then you start harping on the activities. But if someone is getting 10 booked meetings a week, let's just say that's the goal, who cares if it was 50 cold calls and 50 emails, or 100 cold calls and no emails? I mean, that's the thing. I think those only become important if there's something that's not adding up.
No, and that makes sense. So is it 10 appointments a week? What's the goal?
No, we're working a little bit more up the market right now. So we're really focusing on mid-market accounts, which, as anyone knows, the further up the market you go, a lot of the times the longer the outreach cycle can be sometimes and getting in front of people. The way that we kind of have this set based on just historical data. And also, I just want to say, if you're hiring your first SDR, this is super important to say, that person should be helping to inform.
Oh, yeah.
Goal. That's the thing. You can set goals on what you think is best based on historical data, but really you should be listening and taking their feedback and applying that to help shape the role and what's actually achievable. And so that's something that was really important and set the stage for very early on here. But one thing that I think, as far as goal setting and what we've kind of mapped out, the first 30 days of being operational, we're looking to get her to 10 booked meetings across the sales team with our target accounts. And then in month 2, we're looking to get that up to 12. And then month 3 and beyond, if we could get 15 per month, that would be amazing. again, that could change. We may find that 10 is like the magic number and that really works. But that's kind of where we're at with historical data.
Oh, well, that's really good. That's really and appropriate for the target market. I remember going to Outbound, and at the time in 2019.
Yep.
And so at the time I managed a SDR team of like 7, and there were no stats really out there, what the industry standards were, so I set their quota based on what I could personally do, because I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything I wasn't willing to do.
Yep.
So, I'm talking to other SDR leaders from around the globe, mind you. And I'm like, so what's your meetings look like for a week? And, they were like, everyone's like, not necessarily willing to like be upfront share, because we don't know what everyone else has. So I'm like, well, we do 10 a week, 10 appointments a week per SDR. And they were like, wow, that's a large amount. The thing is, I didn't know that. Like, there was no way of knowing that until you call that your target market and find out what results you can produce. Yep. And be informed, so it's amazing to me that from even SMB, right, to enterprise, the vast difference in the number of appointments and how everything is specific to that persona, that industry, and really understanding that. So that's a really good point.
So different. Yeah. And with me having, and I took that same approach. So I'm really like refreshed to hear someone else say that. I run this process still every day, just to be clear. So I'm very much still like a player coach. And I think, when I look at what I've been able to achieve with split focus, which is around 7 on average meetings with our target market, up the market per month. I was like, okay, 10 should be doable for someone who, and again, this is making assumptions, and then you have to iterate, right, based on what the data tells you. But I'm like, okay, 10 should be achievable. This should be good. And then you've got to enable and empower them to do that. So,
well, and then they also have to be SMART goals, right? So specific, measurable, achievable is so important, because that's the quickest way to sync an SDR, is to give them some monster goal that isn't actually achievable, so that they feel like they're never going to get there. We do have one more question here, because we're almost at time. This went so fast. I'm always surprised how fast it goes, but I design these things so that it's only like not like half a lunch break, or a cup of coffee, and not like an entire hour. So Michelle asked, Kristina, how do you make sure that sales and marketing are aligned at Interstellar?
Oh, that's such a good question, Michelle. And I love this, because I really think that the biggest driver to making sure that they're aligned is that our top line goals are aligned. And by that, I mean revenue. And so, one of the things I have written on my desk, and I say this, I swear I've said this on too many podcasts probably, but it says drive revenue, not MQLs. And so, in marketing, a lot of times goals are attached to lead volume and bringing in as many leads as you can. But if none of those are converting to booked meetings, then it's just a lot of fluff. And so I think what's really important is that the head of sales here and myself are really aligned. We meet weekly. We're actually doing our strategic plan for 2021 and really just trying to iron out, that the alignment between our key initiatives. But I think the important part here is having a common goal. And so I look at every activity that we do on both the business development and the marketing side as, is this going to get us closer to revenue? And what I can control at my part of the process is all the way up to booked meetings. So booked meetings is what I am more worried about. And more importantly, conversations, right? Especially right now. I think a lot of people are pushing for booked meetings. Booked meetings are good with qualified candidate or qualified prospects that are potentially going to convert and are ready to potentially buy. But there's something to be said about having a conversation that's insightful and understanding why someone's not ready to buy and getting the right kind of intel on when to re-engage in the future. And so that's what I'm looking at. Conversations, booked meetings, that keeps us aligned too. So
that's great. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So we've got some more. Kristina's on fire.
Back.
Hashtag revenue. So that's so amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. For everybody who joined us, thank you. Hopefully you got some value out of this. Next week, I've got David Massover, who we are going to talk about how we met, but also unconscious bias. Not just his, but mine as well. And sort of that story of how we met and how we got more women on his podcast. So that should be an interesting conversation. Really looking forward to that. So hopefully people can join us for then. And thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.